Join Meat Sauce and Nordo on Saturday, September 7th at St. Croix Casino, Turtle Lake in the Book Sports Betting Lounge. Stop in from noon to 2 p.m. to get in on the action, all while watching the games on their huge TVs. Plus, great food and craft beverages. Get the full details now at KFAN.com, keyword calendar.
Horton at Wolves Radio via the tweet machine. Follow him as 9 to noon does if you are so inclined. And he's been nice enough to spend some time with us chatting nostalgic basketball, the currency of basketball, some NFL preseason. And now let's hit on the Timberwolves into the 2024-2025 with the Vox. Nordo, take it away.
Yeah, well, I actually want to start with how short this summer was. And Anthony Edwards, as we go into this season here, Alan, off of the Olympics, off of the playoff run and all of that, it feels like, as you mentioned, preseason games around the corner, you haven't had a chance to blink, and the excitement already starting to reach the brim for this upcoming season with Ant.
It has been awesome to have a short off season, I got to tell you. I mean, making a run to the Western Conference Finals, you're almost playing to the end. You play to the end of May. It really does cut down in the offseason, but that's a good thing. You don't have to focus as much on the draft, although the Wolves did jump into the top 10 and get Rob Dillingham. But it makes for a very short offseason, but that's a good thing. And then Anthony Edwards with his Team USA experience. These last couple of years, he played for the World Cup team last summer, then the Olympic team this summer. And you just gotta, everybody who has gone through that Olympic system has come back better, right? Because you're around LeBron, you're around Steph Curry, you're around Kevin Durant. And whether it's through osmosis or just seeing how these guys prepare and go about their work, guys come out of it with a different mindset. And the way Anthony Edwards has improved in his first 4 years, I see no reason why he's not going to improve even more. I think we saw it in the postseason last year when he just was kind of carrying this team offensively. And he averaged almost 30 points a game, and he's getting you 7 rebounds and 7 assists. I think if he can kind of duplicate what he did in the postseason, it's not easy to do it over the course of 82 games, but that's the goal for him to take that next step.
With Anthony Edwards, his on-ball defense. Yep. I mean, there's so many things because we chatted with you so much during the postseason. But his on-ball defense, and when I say when engaged, okay, that's not an affront to Anthony. That's the NBA. That's life.
Right.
When engaged, there's not a player in the league who could get around him.
I agree.
If he didn't want you to get around him.
Yep.
Now you run into the Jason Tatums, who are good with right and left, and the hesitation. So, of course, over the course of a long game, people are going to get around him. But when you talk about what's next for him and he continues to improve and develop, man, that playoff defense last year at times by Anthony Edwards, that was unbelievable.
Yeah, you're right. Engaged is the key word. And when he doesn't want you to get into the paint, you're not getting into the paint. I don't think he gets enough credit for that on-ball defense. There are still strides to be made, I think, on his off-ball defense and being aware of not just, the ball, but your man behind you, that kind of thing. But he can, I think, we're really picking nits here because it's just, 4 years of steady improvement for him. His scoring has gone up all 4 years.
Yeah.
He's gotten more efficient, but he can become more efficient.
Yeah.
And when you look at the elite guys in this league who use possessions a lot like Ant does, he can be more efficient. And we started to see that in the postseason, and that's something that I think needs to improve. The turnovers need to come down a little bit, the assists up a little bit, get that assist to turnover ratio where you're being more efficient. And I think that goes to speaking towards the Wolves' biggest thing where they've got to get better this year is offensively. They were 17th in the league in offense last year. They were number 1 in defense, so that covers up an awful lot. But you have to be better offensively. I think Chris Finch would love to have a top 10 defense, which I think you're well on the way to doing because you've done it number 1 last year, number 10 the year before.
Yep.
The Wolves have only had 3 top 10 defenses in franchise history.
Wow.
35 years of Wolves basketball. They've only had 3 top 10 defenses, and 2 of them have been the last 2 years. So that tells you an awful lot about the first, 33 years. And the only other year was the 03-04, and what happened there?
Right.
You go to the Western Conference Finals. There's a connection there. You play good defense, you make playoff runs.
And as part of trying to get better on offense, we saw them.
That was nice.
We saw them address that in a big way via the draft. What do you like about the young kids? Dillingham sounds like he's going to get a fair shake to play some minutes his rookie season.
Yeah.
Terrence Shannon Jr. really had a terrific summer league until I think he nicked up his toe towards the end of that. But what excites you about the kids?
I think you've got to get some production from some of the kids, if we'll call them that. Because TJ is actually 4 years older than Rob Dillingham.
I think he's 24.
Yeah, because he went through a full year. full college experience. Well, the Wolves did something that I think a lot of teams are going to try to emulate, is that they didn't have a lot of options to increasing their talent level on the roster. And so when Tim Conley goes out and jumps into the top 10, they traded a future pick, 2031 way out. That's really the only way the Wolves could have added talent, and they're going to give Rob Dillingham the backup point guard minutes, at least for now, and give him an opportunity. And I think, when you've got your 7 of your top 8 guys returning, bless you.
Bless you.
You've got that covered. But for the whole 82-game season, it's such a grind. You're going to have injuries. You're going to have some guys step up. I'm looking at some of those, that 8, 9, 10, 11. Who are those guys? Can it be Rob Dillingham? Does Joe Ingles, you love his game. He can still shoot it. He's getting up there.
Right.
He averaged 18 minutes a game last year in Orlando. Can he still give you that? That would be great. Does Terrence Shannon work his way in there? Then what about some of the other guys like Jalen Clark?
Ingles can be your backup point in certain spots.
Absolutely. And I think the Wolves have plenty of options at the point because Ant is basically can play the
point. But
point.
it's a mismatch. I mean, you know better than anybody. It's a mismatch game.
Yeah.
He's tall. And like in watching him in just patches last year, he still can beat you off the dribble.
It's incredible.
I mean, it used to be 5 of 5 with a slow old man's game. It may be 3.5 of 5 now. He can beat a lot of players off the dribble still.
He's got some slow-mo to him, right?
Yeah.
That change of pace where you think, here's this old guy who can't move. He can move, and he can still shoot it. Can you get, Leonard Miller? Does he factor into the equation? Josh Minot's been on this roster for a few years now. Can there be minutes for him?
Yeah.
I think that's what intrigues me, because I think who the top 7 are going to be. But after that, who are those guys that help you get through a long 82-game regular season?
Yes, sir.
So when you mention middle-of-the-pack offense, and it is addressed the way that it is in the draft, you look at how things are laid out. You mentioned slow-mo. Kyle Anderson moves on. Jordan McLaughlin really had a hard time just getting on the court, it feels like it done the last couple of years. Do you feel like they accomplished their goal in getting better? Or, I love the way you were laying out the maturation and the continued growth of Anthony Edwards. This incarnation of the Wolves, is it better potentially because it feels deeper offensively, or is it better just functionally because Jaden McDaniels getting more of those corner threes and Anthony Edwards is continuing to bud into a superstar?
Yeah, I don't think we know exactly what Rob Dillingham is going to bring. He's going to get an opportunity, but I don't know that we can bank on the fact that he's going to increase this offensive rating. But I think pointing to Ant, you mentioned Jaden McDaniels. There are 2 guys you can get some internal development. I think what Kat's going to bring, what Rudy's going to bring, what Mike's going to bring. But I think Jaden McDaniels, I think he is going to improve. Will he ever be a 20-point-a-game scorer? I don't think so. Certainly not with this team the way it's constructed. But I think there are going to be more opportunities for Jaden McDaniels. I think you're going to see Ant get more consistent and more efficient, sort of with his shot selection too. I mean, it's a lot of ISO sometimes for Ant, a lot of pull-up mid-range shots. There's a time for that, but overall, you still want to hunt those rim shots and those threes. But I think a couple of things offensively. The Wolves were not good taking care of the basketball, bottom 10 in that, and bottom 10 in offensive rebounding, which is a little surprising because you've got Rudy and you've got Kat. You thought you'd be better in that regard. But if they can clean up those 2 areas, and Tim Conley and Chris Finch have both mentioned increasing the pace. They were bottom 10, almost bottom 5 in fast break points. You've got to get some easy buckets in transition. And sometimes that's a little dicey because you don't want to gamble defensively. You have the best defense in the league. You don't need to change anything up there. And all of a sudden, if you start hunting for steals, which lead to high percentage fast break shots, that you don't want to gamble to the point where now you're hurting your defense. But I think they can increase the pace a little bit more.
Is Dillingham, you're playing very fast right now, is Dillingham with the speed and the dribble, is it as advertised?
I think so. I didn't see it firsthand. I was not out there in Summer League to see it, but you could tell that he's got some quickness to him. He can create his own shot, which I think the Wolves desperately needed when they got to that Dallas series in the Western Conference Finals last year.
His passing ability was fantastic, too, at least from what I saw in
Summer League.
Yeah.
Turnovers were up, too, as you would expect from a young guy. He's going to figure it out, but he's going to get an opportunity. And I think, especially for a young player coming in this league, we've seen it so often where so much is heaped onto a top 10 or maybe a top 5 pick, but they don't have a lot of help around him. He comes into a situation where you've got an all-NBA player here. You've got an all-defensive player here. You've got the defensive player of the year backing you up over here. He's got a lot of talent around him, which I think really suits a young player trying to figure things out and find his moments and find his places to succeed on the floor.
You are terrific at what you do, and we thank you very much for joining us at the State Fair.
Anytime.
Alan
Pleasure.
Horton, ladies and gentlemen, Wolves Radio. He's the old Radio Vox. You can hear the games at KFAN. And around the corner, the hockey common thread we've had today continues. Michael Russo. Michael Russo, preeminent beat writer, not only for the Minnesota Wild, but really as beat writers go, in my opinion. Russo Radio joins us next from the State Fair on KFAN.
Come join us at the 2024 Minnesota State Fair live from Carousel Park, presented by Mesh, Besher, and Spence. We'll be broadcasting live through Labor Day. Come buy your favorite fan merch and learn about your shot to be the Mesh, Besher, and Spence Rube of the Day and win a prize pack. Get the full details now at KFAN.com, keyword calendar.
It's Russo Radio, ladies and gentlemen. Michael Russo, athletic.com, at Russo Hockey via Twitter. And I'm not going to go too far down the road on this. I've done it before. I don't want to embarrass Michael, although he probably enjoys it. I used to work in the newspaper business, all right? So for 5 years, I wrote for the Pasadena Star-News, San Gabriel Valley Tribune, and I was a stringer for USA Today. Now, that doesn't make me an elite Bill Platsky or Mike Lupica combined. However, I kind of know what goes into a beat writer, and Michael is the greatest beat writer of an individual team that I've ever come across in my life. And I don't think it can be argued. So we'll just leave it at that. And you know I mean that.
Yeah, thanks, PA. Nice to see you again.
And you too. And a lot of work goes into that, man. I mean, there's a lot of sacrifice that goes into doing the job, covering the Wild, and some more enterprising stuff now around the NHL than people know. And you sacrifice, parts of your life and personal life to achieve at that level. And you come through with it, man. So, hey, on behalf of all of us who follow it and read it and everything, thank you for being good at your job.
Oh, thanks so much. Yeah, it's been fun, especially going to the Athletic. I heard you talking about the National earlier today, and I'm thinking to myself that was.
So you remember?
They were like 20 years ahead of their time.
Oh.
Yeah. I mean, let's be honest.
I'm 21 or 22 in 85 or 86.
I feel bad that I'm at my back to you.
And the National pops up. Mike Lupica was a columnist. I'm covering horse racing at that time for the Pasadena Star-News. It's my first job while I'm going to junior college.
Yep.
Brad Free, who was a fellow staffer with us, left to go to the National to be the National horse racing guy.
Yeah.
So therefore, Brad and I were really close. He was one of my mentors. So I followed the National and kind of it was phenomenal until they ran out of money.
Right, and that's the thing. It's why they were so far ahead of their time. Like infrastructure-wise, having offices and having to print paper and getting the news to you late. Like it just, obviously didn't work. And that's what the Athletic is right now, is only we don't have to have the infrastructure. We don't have to print papers and do all that type of stuff. So and it comes to your phone right away, as opposed to all of a sudden, remember the hockey news, sporting news.
Yeah.
I remember I used to freelance string for the hockey news, and I'd send my article in, and 2 weeks later it would come out.
Right.
And this was weekly. Wow. I worked for them four times a month. Where I'd write just 500 words on the Panthers.
Yeah.
And yet somehow they had a gazillion subscribers. You can't do it that way anymore.
I did a podcast within the last 6 months with Don Mitchell, Fox 9, Jim Souhan. It might be part of that family, the Talk North, whatever.
North, yep.
Yeah. So Jim Souhan was kind of the co-host, and I've known Jim for quite some time. I don't know him extremely well, but we went down the road of talking about the newspaper industry back when we're talking about now. So I graduated high school 84. So this would be 88 to 93 for me. I became a racetrack announcer full time in 93. And do you remember when you would write a story, okay, on a computer, which was new, called a trasher?
Oh, yeah, Trash 80.
A Trash 80.
Yep.
Okay, and then you would have to take the couplers,
acoustic rubber couplers,
put them on a phone, and if there was a 9, it was aggressive. You had to find a different phone. Call the newspaper, and then you would hear what people would think a fax machine sounds like now. Well, that was the fax machine sound before the fax machine.
Right. And if there was any,
and if it came across garbled, which was what it was called, garbled.
If there was any like noise in the background, all of a sudden your letters at the paper would just become garbled, and you'd see on your little screen of the Trash 80, TRS 80.
There we go.
And it was a Radio Shack machine, and then I upgraded. I remember still to this day when I upgraded to the Tandy 102, and I was the man.
Well, the Tandy 102 had the little stand.
Yes.
So therefore, the flat one, the first Trasher, was flat, and the Tandy came out and had that little stand.
And as a high school writer, back in the day, you have to file a lot of stories they would write at a game at a payphone at, say, a 7-Eleven. And I remember being in Pahokee, Florida, doing an Anquan Bolden feature at like 11 p.m. filing. I still remember the number, 1-800-776-6979.
When Bolden was in high school?
Yeah, so this would have been the Sunset
mid-90s.
Yep, early to mid-90s. Yeah. And I would have to, I covered Fred Taylor played at Glade Central.
Wow.
It was I covered Travis Henry back in the day.
Well, it might have been the Gaffney guys too from the Jacksonville, like Jabbar Gaffney or whatever.
Yeah. I covered a lot of. I covered Vince Carter back in the day. I covered A-Rod. I covered, I'm old. So, but I remember being at the 7-Eleven trying to file this story. And these guys were like on basically hanging on their cars, like just making all this noise, and I had to go up to them like, excuse me.
Yes.
I'm like, I need you to shut the F up for like 5 minutes. Just let me allow this. And they wanted to know everything, and they were like all excited when they found out that I was doing this Anquan Bolden. For the Sunset.
Anquan Bolden, one of the great run blocking receivers in the history. I mean, he was a tough sucker.
But he was the quarterback of that high school.
Wow.
He wasn't a wide receiver.
Wow.
Yeah, he was a quarterback at Pahokee.
Yeah, when in 2003, I think that was his rookie year. The Vikings had an infamous loss at Sun Devil Stadium to the Arizona Cardinals. And it knocked the Vikings out of the playoffs. Green Bay eventually would make the playoffs by winning the same game. Anquan Bolden. All right, so this game ends with current Vikings quarterbacks coach Josh McCown throwing a pass to something called Nathan Poole, who catches it, and it was super dramatic right at the end of the game. The first guy over to mug Nathan Poole was a fired-up Anquan Bolden wearing 81 to embrace him. So that was his rookie year, and that's 03. So then you go back to high school, man. Back in the 90s.
It was fun. I mean, I had a blast covering. I mean, to me, like, using those acoustic couplers and Trash 80, covering preps, especially in South Florida where football was king. And I mean, there were just so many different guys down there, Mitch Richmond and incredible high school talents. It teaches you how to be a sports writer and teaches you to work hard. You don't have a PR guy giving you stats. You can go online and, you're in torrential rainstorms, walking the sidelines and things like that.
Oh, yeah.
It just, it really teaches you how to, to me, covering preps is how you become a really quality sports writer.
Well, let me ask you then, when did you settle in on hockey? So you're covering the glory days of Miami high school sports and all that, and still today.
Long Island, right?
Yeah. The name
Pop Van and Bossy.
Yeah. So I grew up in Palm Beach County, and so I mostly covered Palm Beach County sports and Broward County sports. The Sun Sentinel was right in the middle and went into all three. But I settled in hockey. So in the early 90s, there was something called the West Palm Beach Blaze, the Sunshine Hockey League. There were 4 teams in Lakeland, Daytona Beach, Jacksonville, and West Palm Beach. Bill Nyrup from Edina, Minnesota was the coach of the West Palm franchise, the GM of the West Palm franchise, the owner of that franchise, but the commissioner of the league.
Well, wow.
He used to stack that team, and they won 3 straight Sunshine Cups. And that's how I grew up an Islander fan, moved to Florida. There was no hockey, and that's how I started to kind of learn the sport. Nyrup used to teach me systems and things like that, and I used to go up there essentially for free, write these like 20-inch gamers, and they'd cut cut it to like 3 inches in the paper.
Oh, yeah.
But I was relentless and went out there and went out there and went out there. And then obviously 93, the Panthers came. Starting in 93, I was freelancing while working at the Sun-Sentinel for Associated Press. And so I'd run quotes of Panther games, Heat games, Marlin games, cover a lot of court cases, University of Miami players arrested.
Wow.
So it taught you a lot of stuff. And then in 95, the year that they went to the final, I started being like backup to the backup. And then in 97, that's when they made me the full-time beat writer.
So you lived in South Florida during the Jimmy Johnson Miami Hurricane days.
Yep.
Wow. I mean, Canes football has fallen off precipitously.
Yeah.
And maybe because they're doing things above board.
Yeah.
Because you're right. I mean, there were a lot of salacious and a lot of aggressive
guys arrested.
Yeah.
I mean,
some of the players they had, man.
Yeah.
I mean, it's on or off the field. On the field, it was unbelievable. Off the field, I'm certainly not saying any of these people were embroiled in any illegality or controversy. But I mean, there was a time with their running backs. They had Clinton Portis, Edgerrin James, and Willis McGahee.
Yeah.
Okay, that was their 3 deep. I think there was one more too.
Yeah.
And they all stayed there, no NIL, no transfer portal. They all stayed and waited their turn.
Yeah, and that was back at the actual Orange Bowl.
Yeah.
Which was
Miami Gardens.
Yeah, crazy.
Which might have been the murder capital of the United States of America at that time.
So then 92 though, I covered UF. So Shane Matthews, Steve Spurrier was the coach. And 93, the year that FSU won the national title, I was around that team a lot.
So you know Gene Deckerhoff.
Yeah, I know. I love Gene Deckerhoff.
Really? You've known him for 30 years?
Yeah, exactly.
Wow.
And he wouldn't know me from Adam, probably remembering, but I remember just.
Well, what's your brother have to do with it?
And what was crazy about Gene Deckerhoff is he would do an FSU game, even if they were on the road, but the next day he would do the Buccaneers.
Aggressive.
And it was crazy, and that's back when it was very hard to travel.
Yeah.
But that was, Charlie Ward and that whole work done, and it was an amazing.
Charlie Ward
FSU
would beat you on the football field, and a month and a half later cross over on you for 30 for the FSU basketball team.
And that was the year they lost. The year they won the national title in '93. Remember they lost that game at Notre Dame, and everybody thought that game 2 of the season. Everybody thought they were done, and then they wound up obviously winning it. But I remember, so I covered Bowden, and then years later. I mean, this had to be like.
And by the way, the FSU Notre Dame game, go ahead in 2024 and tweet Catholics versus convicts. Go ahead and put that out there, because that was you would see it newspaper headlines on TVs and stuff,
In the early, but here's how about this one? So early 2000s. Panthers and were out in Phoenix, and they were playing, I think of it at that point, America West Arena. And the next day was the Fiesta Bowl national championship game. It was either day before or day after. You can fact check this. And so I'm at the Fiesta Bowl. I'm like helping Craig Barnes, our beat writer, cover the national championship game. I'm on the roof. This is back long ago where Al Gore was at the game, and after the game they shut down the press elevator, and all of us out of shape sports writers had to walk up the top of it.
Then he looked at your trasher and held out something called a computer and said, "Hey, this is coming. You better get with the program."
So it's a national championship game, and this tells you all the class that at least I had my experience with Bobby Bowden. I had not been around the team for years. I'm like the backup. I barely knew Bobby Bowden, covering him for the Sun-Sentinel, and they lose the national championship. Peerless Price was playing for Tennessee at the time.
Wow.
That's how long ago this was. And after the game, I'm just leaning against the wall waiting for Bobby Bowden's press conference to start. They just lost this just gut-wrenching game.
Yeah.
And he walks in, he sees me with the corner of his eye, and he comes up to me. He's like, "Mike Russo," and he gives me this big hug in front of all the media. And I'm like, hey, I couldn't even believe that he remembered me, let alone treated me like that after a game. So my always experience with Bobby Bowden was incredible.
Well, that is antithetical to Deion Sanders and a columnist guy for the Denver Post.
Yeah.
I think his name is Sean Keeler. All right. Now, a lot's changed in the newspaper business where, let's say X amount of decades ago, like here in this market, Dan Barrero, phenomenal columnist. New York, Mike Lupica. Southern California, Scott Osler. Mark Wicker for the Orange County Register.
Oh, the best.
Northern California, Mike Royko in Chicago. It's not like that with columnists anymore. So many things have changed from a prominent name standpoint. So, I've never heard of this columnist, Sean Keeler. However, I would assume you've read up on Deion and the Buffalo's football program banning the Denver Post columnist. Yeah. I mean, it's like if you're a journalism student and my daughter goes to school there, but she's not in the journalism program. If you're a journalism student at Colorado Boulder, and this is happening, how would you look at it?
Well, that's to me the biggest thing. Like, look, I think that you have to do something really egregious for any pro team to sit there and ban a writer, but at least it's a pro team. And trust me, I can't imagine. And I've written a lot of negative things over the years of the Wild over the years, and there was only one person that tried to ban me, and that didn't work out for him.
How is Miko these days?
Yeah, exactly. I'm talking about Paul Fenton.
I'm playing.
But
we got it out of him. We did. I'm a Bulldog reporter.
Yeah. But to me, like, this is an institution of higher learning that teaches journalism, and you have this major university that's paid by taxpayers that's sitting there and banning reporters just because the coach doesn't like what he's writing, and then they don't have the cojones to stand up to the coach and say, no, we're not doing that. This isn't allowed. But now, I will say I have not written. I've seen some of the things that he has written about Dion, and I still don't think that's
not personal.
Right.
So if like last year, I mean, it's with Dion here, they beat TCU. I mean, I get back there 4 or 5 times a year, and I was there during football season during the Vikings bye last year. It's unbelievable in that city and on that campus because of Deion Sanders and just what he has stamped with a Moribund program. Now, they took a Saturday night loss, I think it was to Stanford, where they blew a 30-point lead, and it was at home, and it was an ugly loss. They didn't win the rest of the way. And it got equally as ugly there because Deion put himself in that spot.
Yeah.
But like my guy, whatever his name is, Sean Keeler, if he writes that performance was prime slime, not prime time, he's not saying the Sanders family is slimy.
Right.
He's not saying you're of the slime trash variety. He's saying the performance was. So, Deion's tripping right now.
Yeah, no, I don't like it. And look, and it's hard for the average fan in today's day and world to feel any sympathy for the media.
Right.
But this isn't right. If we all want a free press, this should definitely not be allowed. I mean, we're talking about sports here, and to me, it's like. All of us, when we go into a press box, and I know that reporters tend to think of themselves in a very high standing. All of us have crazy egos, but the reality is we are only there to write to the fans that are paying a lot of money to continue their entertainment so they know what's going on with the team, give you personality profiles on players and things like that. This isn't, we're not covering the White House. We're not covering international, wars, what's going on now in the world in different places. This is sports. And the point of us being there is to write for you, to ask questions that you don't get the ability to write because we're there. And so to have a major newspaper, the Denver Post, that is essentially not allowed to have their columnists there. And right now they're making it specifically for this one columnist. But a couple of weeks ago, I saw a video of Deion Sanders asking a guy, a guy introduced himself as something from the Denver Post. And he's like, I don't answer questions from the Denver Post. And it wasn't even that writer, which is totally inappropriate. And so, I just think that, as I said, nobody's going to have sympathy for media in today's day and age. But there's a reason why we are there, and it's to continue the entertainment. So you have an unbiased look at the team. If you want to, just the homer coverage and things like that, go to the school's website. Read the.
I know what you mean.
Yeah, exactly.
So, what is that balance then? Because this is an extreme. A guy has been banned from covering a team. But I would say a lot of outsiders who look at it, it's like some teams might favor good relationships or favor positive feedback to the degree when you're talking about gatekeeping and access. So as a journalist, you want to ask difficult questions, but you know that if you set off a head coach the wrong way, that you're never going to get that connection, that relationship. And I just think that that's a balance. And the more of these situations that take place kind of hurt the credibility of the journalists like yourself.
Yeah, exactly. And
Amen.
But look, the reality is that it always depends on the hires up of the team that you're covering. I just look at it from a Minnesota Wild standpoint. Aaron Sickman wouldn't let it happen. Their PR guy. Bill Guerin and I have obviously disagreed on a lot of things that I've said or written, but he still treats you with respect. And I can guarantee you that Craig Leopold and Matt Maka would never allow something like that to happen.
Yeah.
So this is on the people that are higher up at that university. Now, maybe I saw the story that this was put into Deion Sanders' contract, that he gets to talk to specific people and can determine not.
Wow.
Well, that is whoever wrote that contract, whether it was the president of the university or the SID,
No, it'd be the president,
the athletic director. I mean, that is absolute garbage that was put in.
That's
and apparently,
unbelievable.
the baseball coach and the basketball coach, they don't have that at that college in their contract. So technically, Deion Sanders is not doing anything that's against his contract. But again, this is an institute of higher education. There's a lot of journalists that are going to come out of there. There's a lot of communications and journalism students there and professors there that I cannot imagine agree with this, and it's a bad statement to make.
How was Prague? And how long were you there?
I was there for 5 days, and it was outstanding. Talked to 22 players, including a lot of stars. Talked to Dave Pasternak, Sebastian Aho, Martin Nietzsche. There were just several players there. A lot of young quality stars, too, like Slavkovsky from Montreal. Talked to Zetterlund and Eklund from my life. And what I love about, first time in my life, what I love about going to these European media tours is one, like I'm going to the one in Vegas September 9th to the 11th.
Of course you are.
And there I'm sitting at a table and we're talking to 36
What
stars.
kind of table?
Does
it have felt?
It is at the Encore.
Thank you.
But we're talking to a bunch of players, but it's like 5 or 6 of us at the table.
Yeah.
Where in Vegas, it's not, in Europe, it's not like that. And next year's is going to be off the hook. I cannot wait till next year's, because that one's going to be in Milan, and it's going to be obviously a 2026 Olympic preview. So I think that the players that we get from every team are going to be extraordinary. But what I love about it is that, at a minimum, it helps me develop relationships with players that I've never talked to in my life. Like here's a good example: JJ Peterka, the kid that scored 28 goals for the Buffalo Sabres this year. Like, he walked in the room and right away just remembered me from last year. Same thing with Luukkonen and guys like Veri and Rasmus Sundin came right up to me. UC Soros, who wasn't that last year, but right away knew you. So it helps you develop relationships. So then when you go into an opposing locker room this year, they're right away at least going to have a familiarity with who you are. So I got a bunch of features coming out. I'm talking to Barry Trotz tomorrow for a Soros feature and everything that's gone on in Nashville, where they just traded their young goalie.
Well, you didn't write for a month and a half. I'm glad you got a bunch of stuff in the hopper.
Yeah. I'm doing a big Nietzsche
No, seriously,
story.
you didn't. Is that the longest? When's the last time you went a month and a half without filing a story?
It's been a while. I covered the playoffs for 2 months. So at some point, you got to catch up.
Well, I'm not saying it wasn't well deserved, but when I started researching Russo Radio at the Athletic,
that's why we have Joe Smith here.
Right.
No, the bad thing is that Joe was on paternity leave at the same time that I decided to take a hiatus.
Oh, geez.
Yeah, it didn't work.
You got to love that, though, right? I mean, Joe, and the great work he does has really opened up the flexibility, and I'm sure that's part of the plan.
Yeah.
But, early on, talking about, how much you grinded, how much you worked, you got to watch Oilers, Panthers up close.
Yeah.
You're now doing things like you just were in Prague, or will be in Milan/Vegas at some point. Like that, part of the plan, but Joe does a great job, allows you the freedom to do some of this other stuff.
Yeah, and that's, you get burnt out sometimes doing the same thing every day. Anybody that with a job knows that. And so this gives me a little bit of versatility to do other things. And to me, this is year 30 covering the NHL coming up for me.
Wow.
I mean, that, if I was every day just going there and doing a wild power play notebook, I'd probably be out of this business years ago, right? Not
that there's anything wrong with people
exactly.
that do the wild power play notebooks.
So, and that was what, everybody, we've discussed this 1,000 times.
Yeah.
Everybody knows I didn't want to leave the Star Tribune, but it was just, this opportunity came up, and it provided something very, very different. And now, that I've been at the Athletic since 2017, and they're allowing me to do a lot of these other national things and cover GM's meetings and cover 2 months to Stanley. I mean, what was really cool about, and I honestly didn't pick Florida because I thought that it'd be cool to go cover my old team. But they asked me when the Wild didn't make the playoffs, what if you had to pick one team, what would it be? And I said Florida because I thought they had the best chance in the NHL to go and win a Stanley Cup.
Of course you did.
Wound up covering them for 4 rounds. Yeah, it was pretty fun.
Michael Russo at Russo Hockey via Twitter. When we return, we will spend our final segment with the preeminent beat writer in the country discussing the 2024-2025 Minnesota Wild. That takes place next on KFAN.
Wolves fans, single game tickets for the 2024-2025 Timberwolves season are on sale right now. Purchase single game tickets at timberwolves.com/single. That's timberwolves.com/single.
So what do you think of the squad this year?
I mean, it's largely the same squad as last year. So, they are completely relying on internal improvement from a lot of guys and better health. And, I think that's what I expected coming into the offseason. I thought that maybe with their, limited cap space, they would try to go and get maybe a more of a scorer. Mm-hmm. But, looking back at it now, I mean, I think that it makes a lot of sense what Bill Guerin did with going after Trennan. And then this is if we don't, I want to see Liam Ogren get a chance to go into that top 6 role and get that opportunity. If they're just going to come back and expect Marcus Johansson in year whatever he's been to get more than 40 points, it's just he doesn't do it. So I'd love to, to me, this is an opportunity to go and for an Ogren to go and to me, show his stuff, even though he's a young player.
Is there a floor? Is there a floor for? I mean, he's such limited exposure last year. Husnudinov, I think, played in less than 20 games, and those are two guys that you would figure to be prominent. I mean, they're relying on these guys.
Yeah, absolutely, but they're also relying on guys to have better years. Zuccarello in the second half when he was split from Kaprizov at even strength really fell off the map. I look at they didn't love Hartman's year. He still had 20-something goals. They're looking for a better year. They're looking for Marcus Foligno to be healthy, Jared Spurgeon to be healthy, their goaltenders to be better. So a lot of it's going to have to come from internal improvement and then to be healthy. And they've got to get off to a better start. They've gotten off to lousy starts the last couple of years. And Bill Guerin, I think his first day of camp when they meet the night before, I think that's going to be his big message there is that, don't look at this 7-game road trip that's to start the year after their first couple games at home as something that's going to be, an excuse to all right, we just got to go 500. They've got to have a better start because it's something they never were able to catch up from last year.
So Brock Faber gets paid. How does Brock Faber get better? If you're analyzing his game, how is he even better this year than he was last?
Well, I do love the message that Guerin made to Faber in the video that they put out when he signed the extension is just continue to be yourself. I think a lot of, especially young guys, that all of a sudden see it, even though he's not making that 8.5 this year, you see that and you start to think, all right, now I've got to beat Cale Makar, and that's not what they paid him to be. Cale Makar is Cale Makar. He's a special player. They want him to just continue to play well, evolve offensively, see if last year wasn't a fluke offensively. A lot of it's going to be on roll. Remember, he got that opportunity last year because Spurgeon was hurt all year. So we'll have to see, is he even going to be on the number 1 power play to start the season, or is Spurgeon back there? If he's not, right away you would almost expect that his numbers would come down a little bit, just not based on him being necessarily on the number 2 unit, but just the number of time that number 1 unit spends on the ice, because even when they're not scoring, that unit's usually out there for a minute and a half. So we'll see that. But I mean, Faber defensively is an elite defenseman. He's such a mature guy. He's well aware of he's coming in. He's coming into great in great fitness level.
Yeah.
But he's a mature enough guy to know that a lot of eyes are going to be on him because of that contract. So I expect him to be just continue to evolve his game.
A minute and you get it all. What changes most dramatically this time next year when the buyouts come off?
No excuses. I mean, that's the big thing. I
like that.
I mean, it is. That's always been what we knew. That I think what made last year so tough for all of us is that we saw them in the first couple of years of the pain with Parisi and Suter buyouts actually get 100-point seasons, and so last year maybe is actually what we should have expected just because of their lack of depth. So they're out of it now, and obviously they never expected to play Faber $8.5 million, so that huge bump where we all thought that they were going to go out in free agency and spend a fortune. That just can't happen right now, in a large part because they paid Faber, large part because he's continued to sign middle six guys to $3.5-4 million long-term deals.
Yeah.
But I do think that the Wild, my gut says is that they're, as long as they're healthy this year, that this is a playoff team, and then once they get past that, we're going to see them where they've got to. I mean, Bill Guerin knows it, Craig Leopold knows that they are going to have to take a step significantly and become a true contender in this league.
So the next time we potentially speak with you is you might even be in Las Vegas for this NHLPA, whatever they have going, the media bit, but it sounds like pictures for nationally televised games and things like that.
Yeah.
So somehow, I mean, like, what do you pull out of this when you're there?
I mean, well, what I'm doing in my normal player poll, so I sat down with 22 players. I'll ask the same questions to those guys.
Of course you did.
It together. Mm-hmm. A lot of really cool questions this year. But, working on features, like I'm going to do, I'll pick 3 or 4 guys that I'm going to actually do profiles on. Like I'm going to do a Hurdle feature, a Nietzsche's feature, a Saros feature from Europe, and I'll pick some guys there. But you're right. It's a long days for these guys. They go from station to station, do social media stuff, commercials, everything.
Appreciate you, man. Thank you. Michael Russo, I'm Paul Allen. That's Nordo. That's 9 to noon. God bless all of you and enjoy the fair.
Making a way when you can. Temporary layoffs. Good times. Easy credit rip-offs. Good times. Scratching and surviving. Good times. Hanging in a jar. Good times. Ain't we lucky we got 'em? Good times.
Podcast today's Paul Allen Show, or listen back to previous show and interviews by going to the iHeartRadio app or KFAN.com.